Hey guys, it's time to Nefas and chill, and we finally have our answer. The Elder Scrolls Online player base has their answer as to when ESO is going to die as a game in an MMO. And the developers themselves, ZeniMax Online Studios, has answered. And the answer is Elder Scrolls Online will not end or die until the players leave. Studio director says this is the title of the recent Washington Post article that is basically an interview with Matt Fearer of ZeniMax Online Studios. And I'm going to be going over this article with you guys. And if you guys are curious as to, if you guys want to read the entire thing yourself, it's not too long actually. The link is in the description down below. So let's go over how this answer even formed. Because, you know, for the past 7 years I've been playing ESO. I've always encountered from many different groups, actually, many different groups of people on YouTube, Twitch, or even in the game, as to, you know, is ESO worth playing? Or when is ESO gonna die? When is Ashes of Creation gonna kill ESO? When's WoW gonna kill ESO? When's BDO gonna kill ESO? I mean, throughout the period of the 7 years, I've seen a few things that people have claimed that will kill ESO, whether it was, you know, the lag in PvP, or the bugs in PvE, or whatnot. People always thought something was going to kill it, or something is eventually going to kill the game. Whether it's buffs, nerfs. I mean, you see it on my, really, actually, you know, some of my YouTube comment sections all the time. All these people, you know, getting on these accounts, changing their account names to like ESO is shit or ZOS is shit, and then saying, yo, you know, boycott ESO. And, you know, I just want to get into this article because it's actually pretty interesting, the varied reactions it's evoked, whether it be on the ESO forums, or in the Discord servers, or on Twitter, where there's actually a lot of um, ESO content creators, players, and also the ESO team members themselves who developed this game. So I'm actually also interested in what you think about this article and what it says about the game, because I think there's quite a few tells that I think we can examine when we actually analyze the answers that Matt gives. So let's get on with the article. So the article kind of starts out here where Matt says, you know what, we're just going to make an Elder Scrolls themed MMO. And then they kind of just, you know, go over the whole press thing about, oh, you know, console enhanced editions are coming to ESO with Blackwood. You know, they're covering the Blackwood chapter. You know, how ESO has become really successful, and you know, for a lot of veteran players, that a lot of veteran players will be skeptical of this claim because, oh, well, they say, you know, ESO has 10 million player accounts, or 15 million, however many player accounts, however many million, and they don't really, you know, a lot of players kind of retort saying that, well, are those active accounts or total accounts made? You know, they're never really clear on this. But anyway, they kind of delve into the success of ESO and how it continues to be successful. I mean, just recently, you know, it's kind of starting to be compared now more to World of Warcraft, not in terms of not just as a competitor, but also as like a standard, almost, when we also had other games kind of acknowledge it. So even Ashes Creation, so, you know, we're gonna postpone alpha or whatever because on, you know, June 1st, WoW's coming out with an expansion, the ESO's coming out with a chapter. So it's quite interesting how ESO actually has made an impact alongside games like Final Fantasy 14, Black Desert Online, and of course World of Warcraft, and potential future projects. So the first question that they ask Matt is, do you guys ever expect the game to run for 7 years? Uh, and you know, I'm gonna answer this question with my own question as a player who's been playing since beta, the beginning. I haven't taken a break from this game. You know, I think there was a point in time where a lot of players thought ES, like the devs, were just gonna cash in and get the fuck out. You know, cash in on the crown string, get the fuck out. But you know, there's always these guys posting on the forums saying, since like 2016, basically like, hey, you know, they're gonna milk you, the crown sword, and dip. But that was, I mean, it predicted like 2 years, right? I mean, we're well past 2018, so the game's still alive. And Matt kind of gets into this whole thing about like, we just didn't really expect this. And, that's pretty much it. On the next one, well, the next question is, was there a roadmap for 2.5 specifically 7 years out? Well, he kind of goes into this spiel about kind of anticipating that it will run at least a long time, whether that's 5 years, 10 years. And I've had this very interesting conversations with other content creators, or streamers and content creators like Outcast. I've had the conversation with Outcast before and the other people about like we talk about it too, right? Like if you're serious about making a career or basing a part of your financial success on making YouTube videos or websites that gets a lot of traffic or ad revenue or whatever, a lot, this conversation comes up a lot, and I kind of have come to a consensus with a lot of the other content creators that ESO is probably gonna last at least another 10 years. And I've kind of also on the side, because content creation, I don't really do YouTube or whatever full time, although I would love to. But I would say for those of you who are interested in making content on ESO as a content creator for a website, for guides, written guides, builds, videos, and building up something on the internet, yeah, ESO is definitely gonna last at least under 10 years. I think so. I think even yeah, a lot of other content creators also think so, and I just don't really see ESO going anywhere. I mean, a lot of people point out the flaws, and yes, I know. I mean, who doesn't know that ESO is full of bugs? Honestly, who doesn't know that we lag in PvP? It's horrendous, right? But even despite all these flaws or whatever, I think it's been tough, particularly for the veteran players or the endgame players, to kind of acknowledge that we're not exactly the dominant demographic that the devs will. I hate using the word cater, because there are certain things that the devs do kind of cater to with endgame players, but for the most part, I guess I'll use the word cater, but here, because I can't really think of a better word in English. But we're not really the dominant demographic that the devs cater to, and it's kind of tough for a lot of us to admit that or really acknowledge that. And it's really ESO is really powered, I mean, by the majority, and the majority happens to be the players who kind of just casually play the game. Or players who are coming back to the game even. And I mean, sort of as an eye-opener, years ago, actually, I also was in this kind of, line of thinking where, yeah, ESO doesn't have long, right? But, what really opened my eyes to this possibility, or rather, not possibility, but the fact that I was kind of ignoring, was when one day I left a guild in game on PC and then I went to join another guild, but this was a guild completely unrelated to what I was doing, whether it was raiding or PvPing or whatever at the time, and I absolutely did not recognize a single person on that guild roster, and just made me think like, whoa, there's a lot more beyond my the personal bubble, or that I'm so used to. And ever since then, I've done everything from PvE to PvP to housing. Yes, even roleplay. I've done roleplaying. A lot of people make fun of me for that, but I've done roleplaying too. And that's part of the reason why I've been able to play ESO for so long. I feel like if I was just PvEing or PvPing for the past 7 years, I would have quit. But yeah, I mean, after experiencing all this, like I can easily see ESO going for another 10 years. And I can summarize as to that's part of the reason why he was so confident saying Elder Scrolls Online will not end until the players leave. Well, when people read this article, they'll try to define this part, right? Because I've seen some, this article starting to spread a bit more in several Discord servers, and I've seen some people's reactions to it, and they're like, well, and they try to define themselves within this, like, who are the players that they're talking about? And I will say flat out here in this video that the endgame players probably not the players they're talking about. They're probably the majority. And that's fine. I mean, I think there's still potential for the, very veteran population to still grow, but it's just not gonna be as dominant. I mean, ever since 2016, 2017, I pointed this out almost constantly to my, my peers in the community, like, hey, things are changing. We just aren't. ESO in particular is changing, or rather, the demographics are changing, not just in ESO but also in other games, right? Where it's not about raiding hardcore. It's not about competitive PvP anymore. It's especially in ESO, because ESO is a very social driven game. And it's become we've gotten to this point where, yeah, we're not the majority or the focus anymore. Maybe we were in beta, or like the first year of the game when a lot of people were interested in PvP. Let's not forget that this game was based on PvP. Now it kind of shifted over the years into a more PvE oriented or more social oriented game. But yeah, that's just kind of my little tirade on the answer and the question here, because again, some people will try to find themselves within this this section here, the players, or who are the players. And here's a quote: people are gonna keep playing it, we'll keep making content for them as long as they're around. And we also have to kind of define the content here. Well, what kind of content? What's the content? PvP is always kind of I've seen a lot of PvPers kind of be disappointed year after year, like, oh, there's nothing PvP related. Like, the last PvP kind of edition was Battlegrounds and Morrowind, and before that, 1 to 2 years before that, it was like Imperial City DLC, and since then, it's really kind of stagnated or whatever. And of course, they've added some things to Cyrodiil, like the new, or rather, the capturable towns, the new outposts, but destroyable walls and bridges, mile gates, and so forth. But yeah, I mean, just the PvP for sure in this game, just kind of the focus has kind of shifted away quite a bit. And what we managed to do, and he says here, what we managed to do is take 2014 launch of ESO and really evolve the game over time to make it more approachable to the people playing the game. And I get a lot of new ESO players or viewers on my Twitch streams, like, asking me, hey, is this worth picking up? Is this worth playing 7 years after release? I mean, is it too late to catch up, or is it, how hard is it? It looks pretty overwhelming. Obviously, anything is overwhelming, right, at first, but I would say out of all the games out there, for sure, ESO, I mean, they've succeeded. We can make fun of them or meme them as much as as much as we want, or usually do, for your bugs and shit, but they know what they're doing. They're not idiots. They know how to make the money. They know what the demographic is evolving to be, and they know how to cater to that, and they know how to market themselves as that, and they know how to actually successfully execute that. I mean, just look at the new companion system coming out. Just look at the focus on content becoming a lot more accessible. Look at how much they've kind of, again, I don't want to use certain words because it may come off as negative, but I guess dumbed down a lot of things. I mean, PV rotations dumbed down, really, compared to years ago. Champion point system dumbed down, or simplified, or made more like accessible to the layman, without going to esoteric math and so forth. I mean, there's a lot of things that they have improved upon, and it's not a bad thing at all. I mean, I think a lot of players do genuinely see the simplification of the game to being bad, but I don't think it's bad, as long as the combat system remains intact. And the combat system comes up quite a lot when we talk about the performance of the game. a lot of players will say this, and I'm sure you've heard this too. You guys watching this video. Oh man, if it wasn't for the combat, I would have quit ESO. Oh man, there's so many bugs, but when the combat works, it's so good. I mean, you've heard this. I'm sure all of you have heard this, right? The people talking about this sort of thing, and the combat system really, I think, is that kind of last bastion of, this game is super casual, super social, but there's still this high, ceiling of potential skill ceiling with the combat system that I think attracts a lot of players, or even competitive players, whether they're PvEers or PvPers. Whether that combat system can, keep holding while they continue to focus on the majority of players, time will tell. But still, if let's say they just fuck up the combat system like tomorrow, I think the games will still go on for at least under 10 years. That's how strong they've pretty much rooted themselves, honestly. Okay, well, here's the main question the article kind of gets into. When is ESO done? Will it ever be done? Do games ever end anymore? I don't even know if that actually is a question. And then Furore kind of says, that is a question we ask ourselves all the time, and I think the answer is pretty easy. The community will tell us when the game is starting to be done, and they have not at all yet. Again, who is the community he's talking about? I think this is part of the reason why a lot of people have received this interview as kind of negative. Obviously, not everyone has received it negatively, but I think that is part of the reason. Again, people will try to identify themselves, or attempt to identify themselves within the context of this community or these players that he's talking about. And again, I don't think it's the endgame players. And he kind of goes on to say about, ESO is a worldwide game. We got players from every country in the world at some point, almost every country in the world at some point. It's not just hardcore MMO fans. People are just going to keep playing. We'll keep making content for them as long as they're around. I'm actually curious if they have their own, little, inside metric. Like, how many is enough to keep funding the game or the development in the game, to keep paying the devs and stuff? I mean, there's got to be a metric in there somewhere. It just can't be like, if there's at least one player that continues to play ESO, we'll still make the content for that guy or for that gal, right? It's obviously not that extreme. I mean, there's got to be a metric. Is it 10,000? Is it 1,000,000? Like, I'm sure there's a metric. But yeah, I mean, it's a cool, I guess, kind of press statement to say, as long as people play it, we're gonna do it. But I don't think that's realistic. And they kind of go into the console update, and I guess he's trying to sell it. We'll see. I mean, honestly, a lot of the hardware, honestly, a lot of the issues I've seen on console after playing on console, or at least just on Xbox for now, is a lot of the issues seem more hardware related than the game itself. Like, people not being able to see ads and stuff. That's hardware related, because I can see it fine on the Xbox Series X, whereas people in the previous generation can't. I'm kind of curious if the console enhanced editions will help that. I hope it would. But until I think everyone kind of gets the next generation, they're kind of screwed on the previous generation. I mean, that's it's gonna be tough, and especially in the midst of all this scalping and all that. I mean, I've been looking for a PS5 for so long, and I still haven't been able to find one. I mean, I was lucky enough to even get one, like, Xbox Series X, right? Or even S. Anyway, and then, kind of going back to what I was talking about at the beginning of this video, are people returning to the game? Of course, yeah, there's returning players. Are there new players who are coming 7 years in? Yep. Is it just a core devoted fan group? What is your sense of the player base? So yeah, I guess we'll get our answer here, because all I've been talking about is my speculation, right? And he said, we have 3 different groups of players generally. Now keep in mind, this is how ZOS, or at least the studio director of ZOS, sees us, right? This is really important. We add millions of new players every year, like millions, and we have every year since 2014, so there's always new players coming in. We also have players that come in and play certain pieces of content, like our chapter, which launches pretty much every June. And then we have players that log in regularly, every week, every day, to do dungeons and so forth. So he's identified 3 groups here. He said new players, And like I said earlier, occasional players who just kind of casually play. And then third group, which is probably the smallest group, whether you do writs every day, or whether you do trials every day, or whether you PvP in Cyrodiil maybe like every day or every 2 days. These are the groups that they are looking at. And if you've noticed, 2 of these groups obviously outnumber the third type of group in terms of both population and also how many groups there are, right? And he says it's a really healthy mix right now. I don't know if it's really healthy. Because a lot of the focus too, in terms of not just the game itself, in terms of game development, in terms of content, in terms of changes, in terms of balancing, for the most part, is kind of, centered on these 2 groups more so than a mix of the 3 groups total. I mean, sometimes in terms of balancing, yeah, there is gonna be things that will probably be taken into account, like, how endgame players will absolutely, I mean, we will absolutely find ways to make the best out of things as much as possible. When I see Saxleo champion in week 1 PTS, I'm like, how do I abuse the shit out of that? How do I exploit that? How do I get the most out of that, right? So obviously for balancing, or for certain aspects of balancing, you will take into account the third group, but beyond that, I don't really see for them a need to keep giving us incentive to really play. Sometimes it does definitely feel like, I think for a lot of in-game players, I think it definitely feels like you're a stranger in your own home at times with ESO. But that's a different kind of topic for a different time. Anyway, how do you get a new player in 2021? Well, I mean, again, they kind of go into semantics here. We don't call the chapters expansions, right? Because they just want people to know that, instead of expansions that have this negative connotation of, oh, it's only for max level players or grinding or whatever, it's just content, right? And that's how they grab new players with chapters or DLCs. And they just kind of get into other things like Battle Royale or Fortnite, whatever. But I think the main focus of this article for a lot of people should be, well, what is the focus? How do they view us players? I think this is really important, not just for the average player to kind of, have some like, back in the mind knowledge of, but also for content creators, because, they said there's a healthy mix, right? But I kind of don't really agree with that fully, because again, it's not just in terms of game development, but also in terms of content creation, right? Because you're seeing now a lot more, focus on solo builds or whatever from a lot of content creators. I mean, to the point that I'll probably, if I ever do go full-time, I'll probably make solo builds, right? And that's really catered to the majority. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I wouldn't say that it's healthy. It's a healthy mix. I think it's a pretty imbalanced mix. But I feel like that's kind of more of a complicated and nuanced topic, because when we start talking about the types of players we need to take into account, well, a lot of factors, a lot of variables. But yeah, I mean, overall, my reaction to this article, it's kind of like, well, I kind of pretty much knew what they were kind of probably gonna say about new players, demographics, or when ESO is gonna die. And again, I really do. I'm not being sarcastic or anything. I really do expect ESO to probably go for at least another 10 years easily. But I'm actually curious as well. I mean, I'm sorry for the long video, but because this is a lot of things to examine, a lot of things to talk about and speculate about, or even discuss, I'm actually curious what you guys think about this article and what it tells you, or how this informs you going forward as a ESO player. But yeah, let me know, of course, down in the comments below, and I'll read them. But yeah, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate every one of you, and I'll see you guys soon.